I want to thank the chair and ranking member for holding this important meeting. I want to thank very much the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Gingman, let me just start with particularly contracting in Afghanistan and Section 841 provisions. Senator Brown and I know you've worked on this issue very closely, pushed to get the no contracting with the enemy provisions in, because one of the issues we've had in Afghanistan, as I understand it, has been that some of the money was flowing into the hands of insurgents. Is that right? And how, can you describe for me how 841 has been used effectively to cut off funds to insurgents? And then, again, Senator Blumenthal and I now have, after a meeting I had with Major General Longo in Afghanistan in July, now have provisions that will extend these authorities to the Department of State and USAID, so I certainly will be asking both of you about that, and also making sure that we can drop the amount from the threshold from 100,000 to 20,000. So can you talk to me about this issue? And I know that this is a very important issue to me, and I'm hoping that we will pass this legislation to further enhance these authorities.
So it was getting the legislation, I think 2 years ago now, was
right.
Important to us. We have it has been used 11 times, 10 times with subcontractors and 1 time with a prime, to a total of currently, I believe, $31 million. We have looked at both the legislation, your bill that was submitted, and then the revised Senate bill that was put out. And provided view statements. We're basically in agreement with the legislation. We did offer, and we have worked with your staff to improve it. I would say I have now read through the current Senate provision, and again, from my personal perspective, since we have not provided a department view statement, I'm in agreement with what it says and where it goes. I would like to continue to work with your staff. I think there is one particular phraseology that limits our ability to, in fact, void. It deals with head of contracting activity and who has the authority. But other than that, we put in legislation asking for 841, and 842, I would also add, is important to us in being able to make it go, the access to records. The Task Force 2010, in order to be able to do the analysis and the forensic work they do, has got to be able to get to the subcontractor records, and Section 842 gives us that authority.
Right.
So not only do we need your bill, but we also need Section 842 extended as well. So
let me just ask, certainly Secretary Kennedy, as well as Mr. Dajabani, I apologize in pronouncing your last name. These provisions that Senator Blumenthal and I have introduced, essentially what they flow from is that understanding that money, taxpayer dollars, are flowing to insurgents and our enemies, and that the traditional contracting rules that may work well in Washington, that you need greater authorities to cut off these funds sooner, particularly in areas where there are obviously wartime situations, but also other contingency situations around the world. So, Mr. Kennedy, have you, I would like to ask you what your position would be on extending these authorities to the State Department, because it seems to me when I look at what the SIGAR has said, they have said that it is important, as well as the Commission on Wartime Contracting has identified this as an area where you also should have this authority to cut off funds sooner. So what's the State Department's position on this?
I've not seen the exact nature of the legislation. I know my colleagues are meeting with your staff, Senator, but I don't want 1 penny of U.S. government money to go to any terrorist, and therefore an independent grant of authority to the Secretary of State to be able to cut off a contract of ours where it is determined that money is going to terrorists. I totally and completely support that. I can add, since a year ago, because of parallel legislation that came in one of our appropriations bills, and in one of the titles of that, we've been running pilot vetting programs of this nature both in 5 countries and a separate program in Afghanistan. So we're on this, but as you say, the ability to cut off a contract immediately, if you gave me that authority, I would gladly take it.
And would you also like to comment with regard to USAID, what their position is? I don't remember the individual I met with, but when I met with Major General Longo in Afghanistan in January, there was also a representative of USAID there. And I apologize for not having his name right now, but he said to me that this was just as much an issue for USAID, particularly of making sure that taxpayer dollars didn't get in the wrong hands.
Thank you, Senator Ayotte. USAID agrees that preventing funds from going to terrorists is, of course, the highest priority for us. And that is the reason we have such a robust vetting system in Afghanistan. This administration is still reviewing your legislation and does not have a formal position on it yet. We believe that we do have strong authorities in place currently, and we would like to examine the legislation more to be able to understand the differences between the authorities that we currently have. However, we're looking forward to working with your staff and on the legislation, Senator Ayotte.
Well, do you vet existing contractors and existing subcontractors, USAID?
We do in Afghanistan.
And do you compare it to known intelligence with insurgents?
There's a very rigorous process, Senator, that we go through.
Well, if it's so rigorous and you think that you have the authorities you have now, then why did the Commission on Wartime Contracting find that Afghan subcontractors on a USAID community development program in Kunar province were paying up to 20% of their total subcontract value to insurgents for, quote, protection, and that USAID Inspector General estimated that over $5 million of program funding was at risk for falling into insurgents' hands? In fact, one of the recommendations that comes from the Wartime Commission on Contracting is that there be greater authorities, given not only that DOD has requested, but this also apply across the State Department and USAID. So I find it hard to believe that you have the authorities you need right now to address this problem.
Senator, we'd like to know particularly what kind of impact this will have on what we are currently doing, and if it is an additional tool that we'll be able to use, and we do not have those authorities, we would gladly go along with it. But we'd like to look at the differences between the authorities right now.
I just want to correct, it was the SIGAR who said that, not the Commission on Wartime Contracting, but the principle is the same.
Yes.
There seems to be a real urgency. I know my time is up, but the fact that you would come to this hearing and not be able to have reviewed this legislation, which has already been incorporated in defense authorization, has been pending for a while. We have been communicating with your staff about, you know, this very much concerns me, that you would not want the authority to cut off funds to our enemies. So I just feel like to not come to this hearing and have an answer for me that you have a viewpoint on this it's really bothers me. So I will be following up on this, and I expect an answer. I'll be submitting a question for the record, and I'd be shocked if you didn't want this authority.
Senator, I would like to say again that we do have a wide variety of authorities at our disposal right now. We've been using them quite considerably for many, many years, and we may want this in our toolbox. It's just that we're looking at it, and we would work with your staff. Thank you very much.
Senator Coburn.